So good morning, Rhode Island. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Alexia Smokler, and I'm NAR's Director of Fair Housing Policy and Programs. My position is new. I'm part of a fair housing team at NAR that didn't exist 2 years ago. We have made fair housing a priority. It hasn't always been so. Like much of America, it's been a journey. But today, in 2022, we believe the real estate industry has a special role to play in the fight for fair housing. So today, I'm going to give you an update about how NAR is putting that commitment into action. So let me share my screen here. It's my privilege, in addition to doing policy advocacy for NAR here in Washington, to lead the implementation of NAR's ACT Fair Housing Initiative. ACT is an acronym. It stands for Accountability, Culture Change, and Training. It's a package of industry reforms and tools for members, associations, and brokerages, shoring up our own house. Why did we launch ACT? Many of you may remember that in November 2019, a newspaper on Long Island, New York, called Newsday, published a hidden camera investigation about alleged discrimination by real estate agents. And it rocked us. For those of you who aren't familiar, let me give you a quick recap of what Newsday was all about. Long Island, home to some 3 million people east of New York City, is one of the most segregated areas in the country. It's also one of the most diverse. But folks live in pockets. People at Newsday had heard anecdotally, and I believe some of their Black employees had actually experienced, that real estate agents were contributing to the problem with steering. And so they launched this 3-year testing study together with some fair housing experts to look at how the top brokerages on Long Island were treating clients of different backgrounds. You may be familiar with discrimination testing. It's kind of like secret shopping. There are 2 testers posing as clients. They both have the same qualifications. They're even dressed the same. And they're looking for the same kind of house in the same general location on the same budget. The only difference between them is their race, national origin, disability, or whatever characteristic is being tested. They each go into a brokerage separately to see what kind of treatment they receive, and then that treatment is compared. If the methodology is good, and in Newsday it was airtight, courts consider testing evidence to be some of the most persuasive evidence a plaintiff in a discrimination case can bring. And what Newsday caught on hidden camera, according to the analysis from the fair housing experts, was that real estate agents treated the white tester and the tester of color differently in 40% of interactions. 19% when the tester was Asian American, 39% when the tester was Hispanic, 49%, almost half the time, when the tester was Black. According to the investigation, agents showed the testers of color fewer listings. They steered them to different neighborhoods based on their race and national origin. They required some to be pre-approved to go out and see listings and not others based on their race. And they told them different things about crime, neighborhoods, and schools. I would encourage you, if you haven't watched the documentary yet, to check it out. It's really a case study in what not to do if you want to stay on the right side of fair housing law. After Newsday published the investigation, the New York State Legislature launched hearings. They subpoenaed agents and brokers. They've passed legislation, and additional investigations are ongoing. Newsday received national media attention. It was cited in congressional testimony here in Washington. So This story dropped on us like a bombshell. Those videos showed us that we needed to do better, that we needed to hold ourselves to a higher standard. We know this isn't just a New York problem. We've seen real estate discrimination documented in testing studies conducted by the government and by research institutions. Now, it just so happens that 3 weeks before publication of the Newsday investigation, NAR had hired the head of fair housing enforcement at HUD, Brian Green, to be its new director of fair housing. Brian is my current and former boss. I also used to work in fair housing enforcement at HUD. And so NAR was well positioned to respond. We immediately proposed this new initiative to our leadership team, and they approved it right away. Again, accountability, culture change, and training. Part of it is to make sure that we hold real estate professionals accountable when they violate fair housing laws. But also, we want to shift hearts and minds so that equal service is something that is woven into the way we serve consumers and the public. So that when we say that realtors hold themselves to the highest ethical standard, upholding fair housing is core to that. So let's talk about the components of ACT. Accountability. Self-testing. NAR is creating a program for brokerages who want to voluntarily test themselves for discrimination. This will allow a brokerage to uncover and address problems confidentially before a newspaper or a private fair housing group does. We have a pilot underway right now where a broker is working with an experienced testing organization to assess how her agents are complying with fair housing law. She will receive a confidential report, we won't see it, and then follow-up training for any problems that may be uncovered. We've had many other brokerages express interest in self-testing, and we'll be ramping up our program's capacity over the next couple of years. We also continue to advocate for strong federal fair housing enforcement, both in our regulatory comment letters to HUD and in the talking points our members take to Capitol Hill. We urge strong funding of HUD's enforcement programs. We believe that strong fair housing enforcement, including testing, is essential to ensuring a real estate market that serves all consumers fairly. Also on the accountability front, we've reviewed the real estate licensure laws of all 50 states and 4 territories. There is great variability among the states when it comes to fair housing education and discipline for licensees. Some states don't require any fair housing training for their licensees. We've shared our research with our state associations along with a set of best practices so that they can examine their own licensing law to make sure it's holding licensees to an appropriately high standard. I took a look at Rhode Island's law using this nifty reporter that you can see on the screen, and I see that you've just added 3 hours of required fair housing training for CE effective this year. Bravo, that's great. You're doing better than 2/3 of the states. But I also saw that you don't appear to require any fair housing training in your pre-license requirements. And someone please correct me if I'm wrong, but that's a place where your law might be stronger. Now, the next 2 prongs of ACT, culture change and training, work in tandem with each other. We're very excited about a new video series, an award we've just launched of Realtor Fair Housing Champion, embrace as part of their business strategy. Later this month, we're going to be announcing our new fair housing champions who will receive an award and some funds to dedicate to their favorite local fair housing related nonprofit organization. You'll be able to see the champions win their awards and hear a discussion about closing the racial home ownership gap at our Fair Housing Month event on April 27th, and there's a link in the chat for you to register. We're also introducing new and innovative training opportunities for realtors. Back in 2020, we released a 50-minute training video on implicit bias in real estate. And this month, we're launching a 3-hour classroom course on implicit bias that we've made ready for CE credit. So what is implicit bias? Susan mentioned it a moment ago. It's the way that our brains automatically and often without our awareness attribute stereotypes to people that we're not familiar with. We all do it. It's the way our human brains work. It's a shortcut to help us categorize things quickly and make sense of all the information coming at us. But it can be a problem because if we haven't had a lot of exposure to other groups, a lot of those shortcuts are based on stereotypes that we get from media and culture. They aren't true. And so even as our conscious minds may hold fairness and equal treatment as cherished values, our unconscious minds may be causing us to treat people differently or unfairly without our even intending to. And that can lead you down the road to a fair housing violation. You're making assumptions about people based on their identity, based on stereotypes. That could lead you into steering. It could lead you into denying equal professional service. So we all need to be very careful that we aren't letting those mental shortcuts make bad decisions for us. Our new classroom training will teach agents tactics to interrupt stereotypical thinking and avoid fair housing pitfalls so that they can be sure they are seeing every customer or client as an individual, not a stereotype, who is treated with equal concern, respect, and service. And then you might have heard about something we launched at the end of 2020 called Fairhaven, a fair housing simulation. Susan just mentioned it. Fairhaven is really a new approach to fair housing training. There isn't anything else like it out there. We decided to create it not long after Newsday was published. We saw in more than one of those hidden camera videos, agents referencing their fair housing training. They talked about what they weren't supposed to do. They named it, like steering. They said, I'm not supposed to, and then they did it anyway. Something wasn't connected. We could see that we needed a new kind of fair housing training, something that really resonated with realtors to teach not only the substance of the law, but that would move more agents to deeply embrace it. And that's how we came up with Fairhaven. It's not your traditional lecture and quiz. You won't need to know what year a law was passed or memorize any provisions. We wanted to give members a chance to practice applying fair housing principles in scenarios that feel real. And so as we developed Fairhaven, we reviewed real fair housing cases and talked to members about their frequently asked fair housing questions. Now, a very special feature of Fairhaven is that the learner is also put in the shoes of a client who is stopped from buying a house because of discrimination. You'll see things from that client's point of view and confront the decisions that client might have to make. The goal here was to elicit an emotional reaction in the learner, to open the learner up to perspectives that they hadn't considered and to evoke empathy and ultimately behavior change. So we've set the bar high with this training. It's our goal for learners to come out of the experience seeing the world a little bit differently. And learners have told us that they got angry or tearful when experiencing the client's point of view. They've told us that it gave them new motivation to stand up for clients in situations that didn't feel right. We're very proud of what we've created here, and I would encourage all of you, if you haven't been there yet, to take a visit. It's a free member benefit, that you can access at fairhaven.realtor. It takes about an hour to an hour and a half to complete. You could pause your progress and come back at any time. So if you haven't visited Fairhaven yet, in honor of Fair Housing Month, log in and try this training. That's all I have for today, and now I'd be happy to take your questions.